What's going on, Falcons fans? Hope you guys are enjoying your weekend. Welcome into Falcons Today by Chat Sports. We're going to talk about some trades and some draft, of course, buzz and rumors out there. So without further ado, let's start the show off by talking about the biggest event in the NFL calendar this upcoming week, the NFL Draft. And we're going to zero in on Tyree Wilson because Bleacher Report labeled Wilson as the ideal pick for the Atlanta Falcons at number 8. Now, right off the bat, I kind of agree with this. I mean, I love Christian Gonzalez, but I do love Tyree Wilson, and I love the idea of finding a pass rusher for this team for more than just a season or two, like Calais Campbell or some of the recent free agency acquisitions, but trying to find some homegrown talent and hopefully have the next Vic Beasley, except it's not just for one great season. Now, Alex Ballantyne from the Bleacher Report Bleacher Report crew wrote this on drafting Tyree Wilson. Pass rush has been a chronic problem for the Falcons. You have to go back to 2017 to find the last time they finished higher than 22nd in the league in sacks. The last 2 years have been especially bad. They have combined for 39 sacks. Nick Bosa has 34 himself in that same time span. The pass rush was so bad last year, the only good thing that happened to it was somehow, by the grace of God, the Chicago Bears were worse at it and had one fewer sack than the Falcons. But they have not had a double-digit sack leader since Vic Beasley, which is going on over a half decade from this point in time. So when you look at the sack leaders from this team last season, if Grady Jarrett is your number one sack leader, good that he's getting a lot of sacks for an interior defensive lineman. Bad that he's number one at 6 sacks. That is a problem. And this has been a problem for quite some time. The Falcons did bring in more talent. They added some players in free agency that are going to help this problem. Is it going to remedy the issue? No, I do not believe so. Kaden Elliss and David Oneyemata, two of the younger guys signed by the Falcons this offseason, hopefully can approach the prime of their career and up their sack number. But Calais Campbell is here on a 1-year deal. Bud Dupree is not a long-term guy. He is a rotational edge rusher at this point in his career. So these additions help, but none of these players I can confidently say are going to be here 3 years from now. Tyree Wilson hopefully would be here 3 years from now, barring being an all-time draft bust. Now here is some more on the Texas Tech edge rusher. The Falcons need to land a premier pass rusher in this draft class, and Tyree Wilson is one of the best pass rush prospects in the draft. The 6'6", 271-pounder was voted as the most versatile defensive lineman by Bleacher Report's scouting department. Wilson would give him a nice mentee to work with and transform the Falcons' defense. The Texas Tech end is projected to have the second highest sack total in his first 3 seasons in the league, based on Seth Walders of ESPN's model. I have no idea how they project those type of numbers. That sounds out of this world impossible. But shout it out for me. Who is your ideal pick for the Falcons? I think Tyree Wilson might be number 1. The only issue is there has been so much smoke around Tyree Wilson, he might not be there at number 8. So let's run some deep level KGB stuff here. Let's tank Tyree Wilson's stock for a little bit so no one else gets him. Heard he is not a good guy off the field. I'm just making up propaganda right now so that hopefully he falls to the Falcons at number 8. I'll put it this way. Tyree Wilson, he gets double coleslaw at Canes. Major red flag right there. Now, the last 2 seasons, if you are one of the 7 teams drafting before the Falcons, do not look. If you are the Falcons, look. 99 tackles, 27.5 tackles for loss, 14 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. Tyree Wilson has unfortunately become a bit of a pipe dream because there has been buzz about the Cardinals going with Tyree Wilson at number 3. I do not see him falling to number 8 at this point in time, but if he does, 270 pounds, 6'6", and bendy like a straw, those guys do not come every single year in the NFL draft. Now, the Panthers are going to go quarterback. The Texans might go Will Anderson. And if that happens, then the Cardinals could go Tyree Wilson. The Colts go C.J. Stroud or Will Levis. The Seahawks go Jalen Carter. And the Lions, well, if Tyree Wilson's still on the board. They might go with him, or they'll go cornerback. The Raiders are the most unpredictable team in the NFL draft, so I won't even try and attempt to say what they will do. So teams that could draft Wilson, the Texans might fall in love with him. I still think they would go Will Anderson, but I remember last year it was all about Aiden Hutchinson as the number one guy. And all of a sudden he got overtook at the last moment. I don't think that's going to happen this year, but it does go to show that just because Will Anderson was the number one edge rusher 3 months ago doesn't mean he'll be the number one edge rusher come first night of the NFL draft. The Cardinals, they might just want to bolster their defense a little bit here and not trade back if no one gives them a call. Seattle, Detroit, Vegas, all make sense to me to land a guy like Tyree Wilson. It is unlikely that Tyree Wilson at this point in time is going to be there at number 8. But if he is there, I know you have invested a ton at this spot in free agency so far, but you just can't pass on what could be a generational household name in Atlanta for 10-plus years because you signed David Oneyemata or you signed Kaden Elliss. You get my point? Tyree Wilson, I think he is one of those very rare elite prospects that if Will Anderson wasn't just a hair better, he would be potentially the number 2 pick in this NFL draft. Now, never miss any Falcons news, rumors, draft buzz. Anytime an article hits the web and it has the word Falcons in it, well, we're going to break it down for you on the show. So subscribe if you have not already, and let's get us to our next milestone. Now, speaking of Falcons rumors, what about trading for Brandon Aiyuk? So if the 49ers are seeking a potential trade with their former first-round pick, could the Falcons be an interested party for the former Arizona State Sun Devil? So Jack Hammer, who covers the 49ers for the San Francisco Chronicle or something like that, tweeting out, players the 49ers could trade before the end of the draft. Trey Lance makes a ton of sense. Brandon Aiyuk, you have my attention. Elijah Mitchell, sure. Javon Kinlaw, I can see it. Any others that I'm missing? Now, Brandon Aiyuk, I think, is an absolute stud of a player who is only on the way up. He had some doghouse maturity issues to get out of in his rookie season, but look at his rise from years 2 to 3. Last year, in a very crowded room for San Francisco that has guys like Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, for him to eke out 1,000 yards off 78 receptions and 8 touchdowns, he is an ascending player that if he was a team's number 2, which he really isn't even a number 2 in San Francisco. It's George Kittle, and then it's him and McCaffrey splitting reps for number 3, if we're being honest about things here. He could really take over as a great duo with Drake London. Imagine Drake London and Brandon Aiyuk for years to come. That is a very fun, not going to say Roddy White, Julio Jones tandem because no one's going to come close to that, but they definitely could give them some good competition. Now, the Falcons wide receiver room needs some TLC, as I like to say. Mack Hollins, nice guy. Wide receiver 2, not so sure. Scotty Miller, slot, I like Scotty Miller. I'm not trying to badmouth the guy, but also you could do better. I think we can all agree. I think Scotty might even agree. The Falcons need to add a wide receiver badly. There's not even a lot of good wide receivers in this draft, actually. It's actually one of the worst wide receiver draft classes in recent memory, according to GMs, scouts, and insiders and all that. In fact, when you look at the Falcons' 4 wide receivers, their top 4 guys, here are their stats from 2022. I mean, Drake London, his rookie season, showed a ton of promise. 866 yards and 4 touchdowns. Mack Hollins had a resurgence, but Kadarius Hodge and Scotty Miller right there at 202 and 185. There is spots that could be upgraded, and that is putting it lightly. So I think going after Brandon Aiyuk could cost you a bit because I'm guessing San Francisco would want a first-round pick for him, and Atlanta's not going to give up the 8th overall pick for him. So it'd be a bizarre middle ground to find, whether it's a second rounder and like a future 3rd or something to sort of make up for the lack of a first. But Brandon Aiyuk and Drake London moving forward, that could be a wide receiver room that puts butts in seats down at Mercedes-Benz. So be the GM. Would you want the Falcons to trade for Brandon Aiyuk? Give me a simple Y for yes or an N for no. Give me your best stab at it down below. Now, like I said, a future trade for Brandon Aiyuk, they're not going to give up their first overall pick for him. He's not worthy of the number 8 selection. If he was in this year's draft class, no one would take him number 8. He'd go first round still. I think a second and a future third, if you are thinking, are you going to find a wide receiver at 44 that's better than Brandon Aiyuk? You're being a bit of a stretch there. Jalen Hyatt and Josh Downs, I like them, but they are just lottery tickets. Brandon Aiyuk is somewhat of a proven commodity who is on the rise. So I like the idea of potentially parting ways with 2 day 2 picks for a known commodity. Aiyuk plus London would be a nasty duo. You have to admit that. It would definitely be a fun wide receiver room for a spot that really hasn't had a lot of sparks since Julio Jones in, 2019. It's been a minute since the Falcons had a real game changer in the receiving department. If you also want to know what you have in Desmond Ridder, a good way to do that is to give him some real pieces to work with. Not that Drake London and Kyle Pitts aren't enough to really get a nice evaluation, but you're going to get a great evaluation. If you surround him with talent, let him cook, let him be the future quarterback potentially, and if it doesn't work out, I've got great news for the next quarterback. You are walking into a room that has Drake London, Brandon Aiyuk, and Kyle Pitts. Talk about not being a rookie. Talk about being a rookie that's surrounded with nothing. That would not be the case in Atlanta like it has been for a lot of other recent quarterbacks who are starting off and have nothing to throw to and no one to work with. If Desmond Ridder is not the guy, well, if they draft a quarterback in 2024, he's going to have a great entourage around him, almost as good as Turtle and Johnny Drama. Now, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We're going to sign off and see everyone later.